So, hi everyone. Welcome to the Way Forward with CGTN Europe. I'm Ken Browne, your host today. So, this is a podcast where we explore solutions to some of the most pressing challenges in the world. So, if you're interested in how we can bring people together, maybe people with differing political views or standpoints, how we can avoid mistakes of the past from governments, protecting nature, then please subscribe. And of course, if you want to hear about winning or maybe better said, not catastrophe losing the fight against climate change, then stay right where you are, because today we are with Aurelien de Meaux. I've been practicing that pronunciation backstage. I hope that's all right, Aurelien. Founder, CEO of Electra, which has over 350 electric car charging stations in 9 countries around Europe. So today we're going to talk about how to beat range anxiety. We're going to talk about some of the myths and lies around electric cars, electric car batteries, how governments should be interfering in the car market, and we're going to listen to one essential piece of advice from our expert on electric cars. So first up, Aurelien, we'd like to hear from you about what you've been hearing here at the Web Summit. How has that been for you?
Yeah, thank you, Ken. No, it's been very nice. I think there's a great vibe, great energy, and I've been talking about electrification. I can see that it resonates a lot. Portugal is a country that is pretty advanced when it comes to electrification. You know, electrification is a bit north-south, like Norway is very equipped, and then in the southern country, like Spain and Italy, it's lagging behind a little bit, but Portugal is pretty advanced. So yeah, good feeling so far.
I've definitely been seeing a few electric cars around the city here. Now we have a live audience here in Lisbon also, so let's hear a bit of a cheer from our audience here to prove to everyone. Here we go. Thank you. Just out of interest, how many people, hands up, how many people drive an electric car here? 1, 2. How many people want to drive an electric car one day? Very interesting. Okay. So, Aurelien, let's start with some of the myth busters about electric cars. I mean, I live in Spain, I live in Madrid, and whenever I see a post on social media about electric cars, there's always someone who has to write, I'm never going to buy a hairdryer on wheels, or there's a lot of anti-electric car sentiment, there's a lot of lies and nonsense. What are the things you hear most in this space?
Yeah, I think this is a very, very valid point, and where we have not been good at so far is to build a strong and positive narrative and to get people enthusiastic about electric cars, because, as you say, there's a lot of nonsense, a lot of fake news, basically, which is not helping the mass adoption that we need at the moment. Yeah, there's been great progress about electric cars. Now you have cars where you can have at least 400, 500, 600 kilometers of range, so it's pretty similar to a combustion engine, basically. You can charge rapidly, like at Electra, you can charge in 15 or 20 minutes. So you're not too far off from filling up your tank at gas station, basically. And yeah, there's basically a lot of political, I think, views on electric cars where, in my mind, it should just be adopted because it's a better product and it's a better experience. When you drive an electric car, there is no vibration, no noise. It is much more reactive because it's much more efficient than a combustion engine powertrain. So it should be the reason why you go to an electric car, and also because it has some, of course, positive impact on the environment, and not just because, Brussels and the European policy is directing you to go for an electric car. And this is what I think we're suffering a little bit from. Since the European election, I have indeed seen that there is more and more electric bashing. And what is funny is that the people who are anti-electric often are from conservative parties, and I think they should really take a step back and think, is it best, as a European Union, where we import 99% of our oil because we have no oil, do we want to stay in this system where we pay 250 billion every year to countries like Saudi Arabia, where oil is made, basically? Or do we want to switch to a new system where basically 100% of electricity is homemade? This is a very simple question. Like, in terms of sovereignty, oil is a catastrophe. We have no oil. Let's just remind that. So we need to switch, because if we have problems in the oil supply, we are doomed, basically. Unfortunately, there's a lot of, caricature on the topic, and we need to build a better narrative.
I mean, one of the things that you hear quite a lot, and it's been clearly debunked, it's fake news, is that electric cars are actually not more environmentally friendly than combustion cars. So let's put that one to bed today. Are electric cars more environmentally friendly than combustion cars?
Yes, and yes. There's absolutely no debate around this. I can find people who will tell me that Earth is flat, basically. I can't debate about this. These are hard facts. It's between 50 and 70% less CO2 emissions. That's one, when you have a battery electric car. And I'm talking about the full life cycle of the vehicle, including, of course, the battery production. 50 to 70% less CO2 emission. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that in terms of public health issue, what is killing people in town and in urban areas is small particles. And if you go for an electric car, you divide those small particles by 2. Basically, you halve those. And that's a major, major public health issue. So there's no question about this.
Let's talk a little about your speciality, the charging. It's another thing that people say a lot, that there isn't enough infrastructure, there aren't enough charging points, it takes too long to charge. What's your response to those kind of fears that people have?
A lot of this analysis is based on maybe the situation 2 to 3 years ago. And it's true that the infrastructure was not completely ready, in a sense that there were not enough chargers, reliability was not so great, and there were some other issues with, let's say, compatibility. But in the past 2 to 3 years, this has changed dramatically. And nowadays, you have plenty of chargers. There is more than enough, basically, because the infrastructure is boomed. And on the other hand, the number of cars has gone up, but not so much, meaning that there's a lot of infrastructure. There has been some standardization from the European Union. I'll give you a simple example. For example, on the plugs, just like USB-C cables, this has been harmonized. So now it's CCS2 for every car to take, fast charge.
That was actually going to be one of my questions. Has there been standardization? Does every plug now work in every charger? Because, you had a lot of rollout from Tesla, for example, and it felt like a sort of an Apple and an Android phone situation.
Yeah, true. So in Europe, like I said, there is a standard, which is CCS2. So even Tesla cars, they need to accept that standard necessarily. So there's no issue on the connector, on the plug. And then when you think about the EV charging pass, because often people have some EV charging pass, there is an obligation for operators such as ourselves. By law, we need to accept every single one of these EV pass throughout some roaming platforms, and I won't go into the details. But so I think this has also helped a lot to make sure that you have an EV pass, it works everywhere. You have a car, it will work everywhere.
Amazing. What about the economics of your industry? So how long does it take for an investment in a public car charger to have a return? How many times does it need to be used, or how many cars need to be charged?
Yeah, it's a good question. So basically, we're an infrastructure business, and the business model is the following. We invest into a charging station. This approximately €500,000. And then we have a concession, which lasts 15 to 20 years on a parking lot. And we need to get some traffic, which is going to allow us to generate revenues and profits and pay back the infrastructure that we invested in the first place. So this is basically how it works. And for that payback to happen, of course, it depends on the location and it depends on the activity. But I'd say we're talking about 5 to 9 years. So yeah, it's a patient game. Like I said, it's an infrastructure business. We are taking the staircase. There's no elevator. And we need also to wait for the car stock to have more electric cars. Because of course, the main traffic inductor is having a lot of electric cars on the road. That is what is driving utilization rate, basically. And today, to give you an example, 2 to 3% of cars are electric in the stock. So every year, between 15 and 20% of car sales in Europe at the moment are electric cars. But of course, there is a massive stock. I think in Europe, there's 150 million cars, and we sell 10 million cars per year. So this is going to take time, and throughout time, we are going to see more and more utilization.
Is it very country specific? Are we seeing, is Germany way ahead of Ireland or Portugal, or is there a kind of a unified advance towards more access to charging points, or are some countries way ahead?
Yeah, so Norway is the most advanced country by far, because the European Union has banned combustion engine car in 2035.
Yeah.
Norway has done this for 2025, 10 years in advance. So now the share of electric cars in Norway is at 90-something%. And as you very well know, 2025 is in 2 months. So they will be at 100% in January. So there'll be no combustion engine anymore will be allowed to be sold in Norway. So the Nordics and let's say the northern part of Europe is more advanced, just simply because they have put some regulation and fiscal ecosystem, so to speak, that is very favorable for electric cars. Then there's sort of mid-Europe, like France, Belgium, Germany. And then South Europe is a little bit less advanced, like Italy and Spain are lagging a little bit behind. And the reason for this also is pretty simple, is that most of the car manufacturers have started making electric cars on their premium models. Just like Tesla, they started with the Model S, and now they're introducing some more mainstream models, such as the Model 3 and so on. But it has started this way. And so the more purchasing power, the more you are able to buy an electric car. I mean, that used to be the case, and I insist on used to be the case, because there is a strong dynamic that car manufacturers are now shifting to mass models in the 20, 25, 30,000 euros range that are going to be available on the market. But yeah, that also explains why the richer countries, so to speak, have adopted faster.
Sure. So it means that we're going to have more accessible models in terms of price as time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. You have many new car models. For example, you have the Volkswagen ID2O, which is going to be launched next year. And it will be priced approximately, I think it's 25,000 or 30,000 euros. You have the Tesla so-called Model 2, which will probably be also 25,000 euros. So many new car models are cheaper. And also what we have seen is that in China, which is more advanced, as you know, there is a price parity between an electric car and a combustion engine car, meaning that it costs the same, even a bit less if you buy an electric car. And how did they manage that? Because they have economies of scale. Because we sell every year in Europe between 10 and 12 million cars. 1.5 million of these cars are electric today. So the more electric cars you produce, when we will get to 3, 5, 6, 8, 10 million, the more economies of scale you can have. And as you know, this is very important for car manufacturers. And then in turn, you can have a more affordable price for the consumer.
I mean, how close do you think we are to this kind of, it's all related, right? It's with the price and with the chargers and getting all the infrastructure in place. But how close are we to a kind of a mass adoption moment where suddenly everyone's driving an electric car?
Honestly, I think we're very close. It doesn't feel like it when you look at the headlines today, because every time I look at the media, which is talking about electric cars, 80% of the time it's not very positive.
Yeah.
But in 2025, you have a new regulation in Europe. It is what we call the CAFE regulation, Corporate Average Fuel Economy. And so next year, the car manufacturers are going to need to sell more electric cars. So, you know, there is the end game, which is 2035. And then there are two milestones, 2025 and 2030. And in 2025, the OEMs, the car manufacturers, needs to achieve minus 15% CO2. Otherwise, they get some penalties. And in 2030, it's minus 50%. So there will be a strong effort and a strong push from the car manufacturers next year to push for electric cars, that's for sure. And that should help bigger adoption. And like I said, price parity is around the corner. I think it's 2 to 3 years ahead. And so I think the second half of the decade, let's say, is going to see a mass adoption. And for me, mass adoption is when we will see, very simply, a majority of cars sold which are electric. So when we pass 50%, I think, I'm not saying it's over, but I'm saying it's the beginning of the new era, for real.
Nice. And I mean, we hear a lot from private businesses that the thing that they really want is for the government to stay out of the way, to, you know, with the regulations. They don't want their industries over-regulated. How far should governments, the European Union, in terms of subsidies, how far should they interfere in the market?
Yeah, so this is a very, very good point. If we did not have a European direction to incentivize going towards electric cars, it would never have happened. For a simple reason that we described, which is that when you start something new, you don't have the economies of scale that you have on the older model. Like car manufacturers have had manufacturing plants that they have amortized for years. And so the marginal cost for them to produce a combustion engine is very, very small. R&D has been paid, plants has been paid. Whereas for electric cars, it's a lot of investments from them. And so it's more costly. Yes, it's more costly. But society as a whole, for climate reasons, public health reasons, and sovereignty reasons, is going to benefit from that. So I understand that it shouldn't be overregulated, but if there isn't, this sort of bigger political force which sets a direction, it would not have happened.
In terms of the charging stations, how do you decide where to put them? Is it as simple as kind of, okay, we'll just put them in the petrol stations and people can charge there? Or you tend to see them in different places. How do you decide where they go?
Yeah, you're right. This is a very interesting exercise because today, when you need to fill up your combustion engine car, refill your tank, 100% of people go to a gas station. Tomorrow or today, let's say, people with an electric car have a lot more choice. They can charge at home, they can charge at the office, they can charge on the streets, and they can do some fast charging. So it is definitely something that we're working on, is trying to figure out what is the share of the people who are going to need to charge on public chargers and who are going to need to fast charge. That's the first question to determine what is going to be the size of this market. And by the way, this is another advantage of electric cars, is that electricity is everywhere. In this place, there's electricity here. You can charge your car here. So it's one of the great benefits. And on the other hand, what we say, okay, is we have identified that the market is about this much. So this gives us sort of a ballpark number of how many locations, how many sites do we need to install. And once that we have determined this, we need to figure out where to put them. And I'll tell you a little story about this, because we have some engineers, data scientists. Hopefully they won't hear this. They've worked on what we call internally a network planning. And it's a very sophisticated model where we take a couple of criteria such as battery electric car adoption. We take ADT, so the traffic on the roads nearby. We take captive traffic. We take average wealth, etc., etc. We put that into a model, and then we say, this is most likely where there is the need for a charging location. And what was a bit disappointing is that when you speak to any real estate guy who knows the area, he would figure out the same thing in 2 minutes. Basically, because, at the end of the day, it's not rocket science. Yeah. You want to be at a crossroads where there's a lot of traffic. There's probably a McDonald's, a Starbucks, and these guys have installed there for a good reason, because there's a lot of traffic, basically. So yes, we rely on data, and we have to. And it's also good to show to our investors. We've raised 700 million euros. And so each fundraising is a challenge on where do you put your location and why. So if you don't show some robust data model, you're a bit weak. But it's also a lot of common sense and sort of quality discussion. We have some real estate committees every week where the business developers, they say, we have found like 10 locations, and we discuss them, we review them to say, do we want to make the investments or not? And every time I ask, who knows this area? Because someone who lives in the area can also give a very interesting qualitative point of view, saying, oh, I know that they're building a commercial center here. I know that this area is very good or it's very bad. And this, you cannot really have it in the data. So I think that's also very important.
When it comes to sort of charging your electric car, like you say, I mean, it's a huge benefit to have electricity everywhere. You can charge it overnight while you're asleep. How quick are cars charging to, say, 80%, 85% now? And how quick can that charging process become? I mean, will there be a point where it'll ever be, you plug it in for 30 seconds and you have 50% charge?
Yeah. So this is not science fiction. I was in China a month and a half ago, and we charged the car from 18% to 80% in 12 minutes. And it was a pretty big car. So the C rate of the batteries, which means like the speed at which they can charge, is increasing by a lot every year. So a gasoline refill is, I think, 3 minutes on average. And when we study and interview some people, what they tell us is that if it's 10 minutes or less, they would consider that it's equivalent. i.e. you don't need to be at 3 minutes exactly to compare. Like if it's 8 or 10 minutes, people will think it's the same. And this is going to happen by the end of the decade.
Amazing. We've been talking to a lot of people here about the technology that is pushing driverless cars, autonomous cars forward.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's pretty cool, right? You have your car drop you off at the restaurant while you have lunch. It goes away and it charges and it comes back and picks you up and off you go.
Yeah, that is going to change everything. I think there are two streams of technology that are advancing and progressing very fast at the moment in our industry. It's one, battery. I already talked about this. And the second one is indeed, as you say, it's autonomous cars. And you've seen what happened with Elon Musk in the US. And trust me, Elon Musk will have no problem to have all the authorization to put autonomous cars on the road now. And I think he was already going fast, and he's going to push this as fast as he can. And indeed, this is going to radically change not only the way people move, because like you said, you can put your kids into a car and say, go to school and have a good day. So it's a life changer for a lot of people. And this will probably in turn change also the relationship you have with your car, where you don't necessarily own a car, but you have one which is waiting for you and can be at your disposal very, very easily.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it. I mean, you could turn your car into an office, and on that commute, wherever you need to go, you're just working on the way. And
yeah, which has a bit of a, I think, can have a negative impact also, because let's say every day it takes you 10 minutes to go with the metro to your work, or 20 minutes by car, because there's a lot of traffic. Driving 20 minutes instead of going 10 minutes in the metro, I think a lot of people will say, I go in the metro, it's quicker. But if someone drives you for 20 minutes and you can do something else, because you're listening to music, you're working, you're doing something else, then maybe you will opt for going with a car.
The lazy option gets even more attractive then, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's unfortunately going to increase the traffic, increase the number of cars on the road. And so we also need to be wary of that potential side effect.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure that we're going to see the trends that we're seeing now continue over the next 5 years. But what's your kind of vision 5 years from now for electric cars on European roads?
Yeah, my vision is that first and foremost, in this business, we need stability. I mean, we are investing 1.5 billion euros in our infrastructure. The car manufacturers are investing billions of euros. So there is a clear direction. I think it has been fixed by the EU. We need to have stability and to make sure that, yes, we have this roadmap to 2035 and it's a long-term plan. Just like in China, why did they succeed in China so well? Because they're number one in electric cars, number one in batteries, number one in solar panels, number one in wind turbines, you name it. So because they have a long-term plan which has been designed 5 or 10 years ago, and they stick to it. And so that gives a lot of comfort for private investors such as ourselves to invest in the midterm. So we need stability, and we need to be positive about this. The transportation sector is the number one sector in CO2 emissions in Europe. It's our biggest problem, but the good news, it's also our biggest solution, because we do have some solutions to get rid of oil in like 90% of transportation. And that's fantastic. And this is what we should be celebrating and embracing, instead of thinking, oh yeah, but I don't know, all the fake news that we already mentioned. Like, I think let's be more positive. Like, you can see it as an opportunity, or you can see it as a constraint. But if you see it as a constraint, you're not going to win the battle. And yes, the Chinese will come and they'll have cheaper car, and this technology is superior, so it will win anyways. So and this is what Mario Draghi is basically saying at the European level. It's like, in Europe, if we become reluctant about any innovation because we want to regulate it, we don't want to adopt it because we are becoming status quo, like we don't move, we are going to lose the battle against China and the US, basically.
Yeah, I mean, Europe kind of falls between there, doesn't it? And just on that point, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the tariffs that have been placed on Chinese electric cars. So 100% in the United States, anywhere from 17 to, I think it's around 36%, 37% here in Europe. what's your view on that? Why are governments putting these tariffs, and is it going to make any difference?
Yeah, so we could do a full podcast of 1 hour on the tariff because it's a very interesting topic. The tariffs have been introduced in Europe on the basis that there have been some strong subsidies in China to subsidize electric car companies, which is unfair, and so we need to put some tariff. Nobody believes this story in a sense that, yes, there have been some subsidies, but we are subsidizing as well. I mean, we have some battery gigafactories and there's hundreds of millions of subsidies for them. In the US, they have the IRA. IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, is $370 billion of subsidies for green and renewable stuff. So the US is subsidizing heavily. We are doing the same, but we are saying, hey, you guys, you're Chinese and you're subsidizing, so you can't do that. So it's a false excuse to basically put a barrier and help our car manufacturers adapt quickly because they need some better products at a better price. And so it's a way to make sure that there is not too many Chinese cars on the roads. I think it's good in the very short term, 1 or 2 years. Also give a wake-up call to our European OEMs that they need to shift. But in the midterm, the Chinese are going to build cars in Europe anyways. They have plenty of car production facilities in Hungary, in Spain, in Germany. So you will need to compete anyways. And you know interestingly enough, who were the first one to oppose the tariff on Chinese electric cars? German car manufacturers. Volkswagen, Mercedes, BMW. They all said, please don't do that. For a single reason, is because Volkswagen is making 40% of their revenues in China and 60% of their profit. And they were scared of retaliation. And they said, don't do it, otherwise we're going to have big problems in China. And if you take a step back, like there would be some good Chinese who buy some German sedan cars, and bad Chinese who try to export their car to Europe.
Yeah,
it doesn't work like this. Like we just need to compete. We need to have the best products, and so long term, I don't think it's the way forward.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard we have some European experts who were saying that Germany voted against it because they know that they're behind the Chinese now, but they think that they can catch up in terms of the technology and the innovation, whereas the European countries driving these tariffs were France and Italy, because they're afraid that their smaller car manufacturers like Fiat and Citroën and those types are just going to be wiped out by Chinese cars.
Yeah, but the real reason is that because the German OEMs have too much at stake in China, and they don't want to have problems in China.
Yeah,
it's as simple as that. But Stellantis and Renault are about as equipped as the German OEMs, and they have approximately the same share of electric cars in their sales. And Stellantis, by the way, has just launched a joint venture with Leapmotor, which is a Chinese manufacturer. And so, I mean, they're adapting as well. So we want to keep our industry in Europe. I mean, the automotive industry is a big industry. It needs to be protected. We need to keep some jobs. But it's true, there is a Schumpeterian, shift where we need to go from one model to another. Just like, I wasn't here to witness it, but 50, 60 years ago, at the beginning of the 20th century, you had plenty people working in mines extracting coal and working in coal mines. We shifted to a different model because we thought it was better for society. Yes, it hurts for some people because they are going to lose their job. But on the other hand, let's say responsibility is to make sure that we find other jobs for these people in the new system.
I feel like you're quite passionate about the subject, and you do love an electric car. I've been lucky enough to drive some of them, and there are some amazing things about them, particularly the torque, the acceleration. It's just completely different to a combustion engine. What are the best things about electric cars that maybe we don't always talk about? We hear a lot of the negatives about electric cars. We hear the range anxiety. We hear there aren't enough chargers. We hear we're not there yet. We're not ready. What are the exciting things? What are the new things about electric cars?
So I think for me, personally, there's one underrated positive about electric cars, which is very underrated. It's noise. Like I live in Paris. It's very, very noisy. You have a lot of, motorbikes, cars, trucks, and so on. And sometimes I imagine like what it would be like if all these engines were electric and then the level of noise would just come down by half. I think that would get people a lot more serene and it would really improve their quality of life. And then generally speaking, switching from a combustion engine car to an electric car is a switch on the powertrain, but it's also a big, big switch in terms of how digital it is. Like, it's a computer and wheel. This is a good expression to describe an electric car, is that not only is it a different motor, but also it's a very connected object, very connected item. And it's the same for us as an infrastructure player. Our infrastructure is very connected. We know how many people are charging on which stalls in real time. We can monitor that. We know what is the car they're using. So in how many minutes will they have finished their charge, basically. And there's a lot of applications that you can create around that. Like, for example, Ken, I can say, let's say you book a charge point at an Electra station. You can do that with the app, actually, today. I say, okay, Ken has a Tesla Model 3. He has 27% battery left. When he will arrive, he will have 25%. I know the charging curve of the Tesla Model 3. I know that you will stay 18 minutes. And during these 18 minutes, I can suggest you to go have a coffee, to go shop something. This data is useful, and it's going to create a lot of applications.
Definitely, I'm definitely thinking about the Tesla Model 3. Now we have more people in the crowd here than we had at the beginning of the talk, which is a good sign, Aurelien. Now, just a quick vote again. How many people have an electric car right now? So we have 1, 2, 3 people from about 20 people here, I would say. Hands up if you at some point want to buy an electric car. Okay, we have 5, 6, 7 people. Yeah, a big percentage of people are looking to the future.
Yeah, I like this. I have kids. I think when they will be older and when they have the age to drive, they will probably look at me and say, how the hell did you live in a world where there was so much pollution, so much noise, and you had like oil all around? It will feel like it was Stone Age, honestly. Like, just like when we see the early 19th, 20th century and the Industrial Revolution. So I do think that we need to do them this favor of making sure that this happens.
Aurelien, the final question for you. Now, top tips on what to look for when you buy an electric car. So if you were to buy an electric car, what's the most important thing to you? What should people be looking for?
I mean, the usual stuff. What is the range? And is it convenient for your usage? And I think, to be honest, one of the things that is often, I think, a bit low in the spec description is the charging speed. At what speed can you charge? And so we are lobbying at a European level to make sure that there is, let's say, a clear and simple explanation so that people understand. Because today some will tell you it takes this much time to go from 10 to 80%. Some cheat and say it takes this much time to go from 20 to 80%. And I've seen some saying it takes this much time to go from 30 to 80%. So we need to have a clear benchmark, basically. We need to be able, because people, if you go out there in the fair, you ask people, how much is 1 liter of gasoline? Everybody will tell you 160, 180, I don't know how much it is here. Oh. You go out there and you say, how much is 1 kilowatt hour of electricity? Not a lot of people would know. What is a charging curve in kilowatt? What is the power a car can take in kilowatt? So if you need to be an engineer to understand how it works, it's not going to work. So we need to make it very simple, have a standard, and say to people, in order to fully charge your car, it's going to take this much time, period. And we need to have the right reference so that people can benchmark and opt for the ones which are most convenient, because people don't want to spend hours charging.
All right, that's our final comments on electric cars today. Has anyone here has it changed your mind? Are you convinced? Yeah, a few people kind of nodding their heads here a little bit. Well, we want to say a huge thanks to Aurelien de Meaux, founder and CEO of Electra Car Charging. A huge thanks to our crowd here in Lisbon. A big round of applause from you. Hey, that's louder than the start. And of course, thanks to everyone here at the Web Summit for putting this together, all the logistics, all the amazing people backstage. And of course, to all of our listeners around the world, that's all from us today. I'm Ken Browne for CGTN Europe. Stay connected, like, subscribe, and share. Thank you, and good evening to everyone.